Nothing is more important to the success of a startup than the first 10 engineers you hire. That's why I started First 10. Hi, I'm Boris Epstein, CEO of First 10, and with me is my colleague,
Alexis Munger. Hi. At First 10, we work with early founders to help build early engineering teams.
And this is the First 10 podcast, where we bring you valuable insights on building early engineering teams from all sides of the equation. Engineers, founders, even investors. On today's episode of the First 10 podcast, we are talking to Kevin Liu. Kevin's a builder.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing that jumped out to me.
Mm-hmm.
He went from engineer, he grew to engineering leader. That was basically the through line in almost every place he joined. And even now he's at AngelList right now. And he's like, look, I'm a builder. I like to build product. That means that I'm an engineer first. And maybe I'll be asked to grow into a lead role. Maybe I'll grow into a manager role. I'm not sure. But even when I'm a manager, we're still building. And what was particularly cool is how he was able to talk about practical aspects of staying a builder, even while embracing a lead and manager responsibilities, because that's really hard to do. A lot of people move into manager roles and they kind of lose touch with the building nature of it.
Yeah.
But Kevin did. And it was really neat to hear him talk about that, describe that.
Yeah. I wish people knew this more because we come across this every now and then where we're looking for a first, engineer or whatever for a company. And they usually want somebody who's held a leadership position in the past. And, when you go out and you reach out to people, oftentimes I think there's a lot of concern about, is that a step backward? I wish people knew it's not, and that your career journey doesn't have to be some you do the X, then Y, then Z. It can be whatever you want. And as long as you allow your interests, I think, to kind of lead the way, it seems to open up a lot of doors. I think it's really cool.
Plus one. Kevin is an engineering lead at AngelList, company he joined early last year. He was one of the first 10 employees at Klout, where he helped build the product engineering team from the ground up. Later, he took on leadership roles at Nextdoor, building products for millions of users and even spearheading initiatives with a social project, like the Health Map. But Kevin's journey doesn't stop there. He became an angel investor at 776, getting a peek behind the curtain at countless startups. Now he's back in the engineering saddle at AngelList, leading the charge to build software that empowers the private market. Talk about coming full circle. We've invited Kevin on the First 10 podcast because we thought his story is a fantastic example of the First 10 mantra. There's nothing more important to the success of a startup than the first 10 engineers you hire. So today, we'll hear about Kevin's incredible journey and gain valuable insights into what it takes for early engineers to be successful. Kevin, welcome to the First 10 podcast.
Thank you, Boris. That's an amazing intro. Thank you. It's just weird hearing about yourself in the third person like that. Good to see you again. And you too, Alexis.
Thanks. It's not the first time we've heard that too. Everybody's always like,
whoa,
I did all that?
Yeah, I'm going to need that.
I will send you a copy of that, Kevin.
Very good.
Well, we usually like to start out with Icebreakers before we even get into anything. And so particularly for you, I have a good one. What was your favorite swag item from Nextdoor? And do you still have it?
Oh, my favorite swag item from Nextdoor. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much swag, of course, in that era. But the first one that comes to mind is actually a beer koozie.
Oh.
Right. Which was, it's very sort of emblematic of the time of the industry at the time.
Yes.
But yeah, that was I think I still have it somewhere in the garage.
I was looking for some swag to show you, but I couldn't find any. But I'm sure if I dug hard enough, I would find it.
Yeah. There's many objects in the garage. There's Frisbees, lemonade pitchers, some very on-brand swag. And of course, there's shirts for everything.
Yeah. That was really good swag, by the way. It was particularly good.
It was solid. Yeah. Shout out to Brian Van Veen. Brian Van Veen was our designer at the time who was responsible for product design and also the swag. So yeah.
Love it.
So we're going to keep the swag train going. So speaking of swag, Kevin, do you still have your vesting vest from Klout?
That is, how did you know about that?
We can't tell you all of our secrets.
Yeah. It's still in the family. I actually gave it to my mom. So if you're wondering where all logo gear goes in my family, it goes to my mom.
Aww.
So I actually just gave it to her a few weeks ago.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, I outgrew it.
Well, that's awesome. Is it true you had to vest to get the vesting vest?
Yeah, you got it. You got it after your first year.
Amazing.
I love that.
I love the concept of that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that kind of stuff would fly nowadays. It was a little bit bold, I think. It was one of the company values. It was to be bold, but yeah, it was a vest.
It was a vest.
And had a little embroidery in the back neck. It was hashtag vesting vest. So yes, that's a deep cut.
I think it's cool.
So
I think if it's not already back, then it should be brought back. I think bold.
Yeah.
I think bold is in right now.
It should be celebrated. Vesting should be celebrated, especially the average startup tenure is 18 months. So if you make it to a year, you should get something.
You should get that.
You should get a vest.
Everyone knows the big deal to vest. They should just kind of come out and be loud and proud and,
Yeah, just do it.
Get a vest while you're at it,
It's
just do
punny and funny at this. I just like it. I don't know. I think it's funny.
There's a lot going on there.
Okay, so speaking of back then,
Yes.
we saw a note that your first year out of college was right, post .com bust, right? You came up during that, tough time in the market.
Yes.
Your first job was making $32K a year.
Yeah.
Writing ColdFusion. And also fixing the office printer. So that sounds like kind of like a fun time in tech history. Tell us about, what it was like being a fresh computer science grad.
Yeah.
At that time. For sure.
Yeah, you got to wear many hats, right? When you have to. But yeah, like you mentioned, I tell the story to folks I work with, I don't think I'm old by any means, but yeah, I studied computer science, went to UC Davis, 1999 to 2003. So 1999 is pre-Y2K, but I'll tell you, before I decided to study computer science, right, I grew up in the Bay Area as well. Drive around in the South Bay, drive around in San Jose and stuff. You look at these big buildings. There's a big Yahoo building in Santa Clara. I'd look at that building like, wow, I'm going to work in Yahoo one day. I'm going to work at Cisco one day and make a bunch of money, which was 60K, 60, 70K. I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's study computer science. Let's make this happen. So was always interested in computers, wrote a very basic program when I was 8, right, on my family's PC Junior. So just it was always the thing I wanted to do, regardless of what was going on in the industry. And obviously that's pre-internet. But, you can imagine how excited I was to be in college studying computer science when all this .com stuff was happening, pets.com, whatever, web van. I was like, this is going to happen for me. I'm going to do a startup thing. I'm going to do software for my career. And so while I was in school, everything just started unraveling, right?
Yeah.
So by the time I graduated with my undergrad in 2003, right, the .com bubble had inflated and collapsed, right? So during school, just to kind of work my way through it, I was a student assistant at the graduate studies division, but I was doing programming for the graduate studies office, right?
Yeah.
So after I graduated, and opportunities were pretty dry, the unit that I was student assisting offered me full time.
Yeah.
32K. I mean, not a lot in today dollars, but at the time, my rent was $600. I was like, let's do it. I was committed to doing software.
Yeah.
And so I took the job. So yeah, became a full-time employee for UC Davis, the Office of Graduate Studies. And yeah, I was like you said, Boris, I don't even know if people know what ColdFusion is.
I don't. No. I'm going to have to look it up.
Yeah. It was a framework made by Macromedia, right? It's Adobe Macromedia, and it's just another web application framework. Of course, you've been in the game long enough, things start to look similar. It's not that different from any modern web application framework you have nowadays. But yeah, that's what I was doing. Did whatever you needed to do.
Yeah.
And happy doing it. So, but yeah, I did that the whole time, just kind of thinking in my head, I'm like, will I ever get it into the startup thing? Will I ever move back to the Bay Area to do this? Did I make the right choice?
Yeah.
In studying CS or what? So
yeah.
So yeah, that was my first foray into the working world. I was grateful for whatever I could get. But yeah, that's how I entered this industry.
I can imagine there are probably some people, and actually I think Boris and I were talking about this earlier today, right around that time, you get out of college, you have your CS degree. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy major, but you get into there in the .com bust. Are there people around that are just like, what did I just do? Why did I get my degree in this? Or it doesn't sound like you had that same regret, but I'm wondering if there are other people that did.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. Yeah. I don't know anybody that felt that way, right?
Good.
But as you can imagine, right, you can come out there. I think what the effect that something like this has, and maybe folks are experiencing it now, right? It's just it really tests your commitment, and tests your intention. Why are you doing this?
Yeah,
right? Are you doing this for the outcomes? purely? Are you doing this because you love it purely? It's always a blend of the two, but it really tests your commitment there. So yeah, it kind of shakes the tree a little bit.
Yeah.
For me, I never considered doing anything else in my job, right? Even nowadays, people ask you the question, icebreaker question, right? What would you do if you didn't do this? Like, I don't know.
I have no idea. Yeah.
No idea. So, but I never doubted it. I just had to readjust my expectations as to what outcomes were to come from this career.
That's great.
Yep.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as you're venturing on, you ended up landing at, I don't know if it was hot at the time, but early startup Klout,
yes.
Which I know made its way onto the scene.
Yeah.
What was going on in social at the time? What made you attracted to Klout? How did that kind of end up coming about?
Oh yeah. So it was early days of social and mobile, right? You remember? I remember I got the first iPhone ever. Right? What was that 2007 or something?
Yeah.
2007 is the iPhone moment. Yeah.
But it was still very rare. Like the cell networks weren't as fast as they were now, right? You had like, it was just Edge, right? So mobile was really early. Social was really early. And, if I look back at that decade, kind of 2010 to 2020, like that was the decade of social and mobile. So between UC Davis and working at Klout, I wiggled my way back into the scene here just through contracting, through consulting. So I was working full time, but I was also taking on side projects. And that really opened doors for me, right? It was helped me network, helped me keep my skills more varied and versatile, right? I don't know if the next employer is going to need me to know ColdFusion, right? So I need to learn Rails, right? I need to get better in other things. So contracting and consulting was an avenue for me for that. But yeah, like I joined Klout 2009. Yeah, that was 2009. That was that beginning of everything, right? So Facebook was out. Facebook really got big, I want to say 2008. That was maybe around that time is when they let non-college students join that. But Twitter was early too, right? And so, I have friends that work at both. I have one very good childhood friend who was the first Android engineer at Twitter.
Oh, wow.
And he was asking me to consider joining Twitter. And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, there's this other company I'm talking to, Klout, which is, as we know now, as some may know now, it is I would call it like a social media analytics company, right? It's a layer that rests on top of any social network. At the beginning, it was only Twitter. By the end, we had like 15 networks covered. I felt like it was more durable to work on something that was social network agnostic, but I was still interested in joining the social trend, right? Yeah. So I chose Klout. Yeah. But funnily enough, that first Klout office that I worked in was on the ground floor. It was 795, the Folsom. It was the first floor of a building, and the third floor, I believe, was Twitter. Oh, so we were in the same building. And there's also Subway sandwiches next to it, by the way. I won't forget the smell of the bread as I'm trying to code. But yeah, so I chose to join it in 2009. I think it was, I want to say it was 12 employees or something at the time. It was really small, mostly engineers, really small, just took a bet. But it was that dream I shared with you, right? I was like, I need to move back to the Bay Area. I need to do startup stuff. This seems interesting. Let's do it. So I took that offer, moved back here, and here we go.
Yeah. And then you left Klout as the director of engineering. So that's that's really cool. It sounds like you had some really fast trajectory there.
Yes.
Actually, before I even get into the first question, I was going to ask,
sure.
What was that like at Klout? How did you get there so quickly?
Yeah. That's a great topic. Yeah. Well, first, just Klout was a really interesting time. First, I was in my late 20s, my early 30s, right?
Yeah.
It was also like a lightning in a bottle sort of moment, right? It was like the beginning of all these trends I was just mentioning to you. Like venture capital was flowing sort of past that 2008 financial crisis and everything. But yeah, really, really formative time for me. Oh. Again, I think we invented, I don't know if we trademarked it, but we invented the term influence as now.
Is that right?
No way.
2009, we said Klout is the standard for influence, and you get a Klout score, which was your influence score. It was essentially a probability that someone would react to your content online. But that's we would measure that by reaction. So it's can you influence people? So that was really cool to be part of that. Yeah. And that was my first experience at a high growth company. So both in terms of headcount and revenue, right? And I think, I don't think I'm especially smarter than anybody or more skilled than anybody. I think it's a combination of things. I think when you join a high growth company and sort of right place, right time thing, as the company grows, you grow, you are forced to grow.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I really got into like people management, like seriously. Right. And that's just a function of necessity.
Yeah.
Right. The organization is growing. Who wants to do this? Who can do this?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's like, I just feel like the seas were expanding and I had to sail them. And so, but yeah, like, it was really interesting. We were also funded by Kleiner Perkins. And so I got access to great network there, many resources there. We were generous enough to provide like management coaching to new managers at that company as well. And so that's where I really recommitted and got very serious about people management. And so, yeah, like I felt very supported.
Good.
And the environment was really good. And so if you go back and you can use LinkedIn to filter, right, and see who came out of Klout. A lot of people that I worked with went on to do big things, but of course, Joe Fernandez, CEO and founder, is a serial founder now. His technical co-founder, Ben Tran, went on to run 500 startups Vietnam and now is a GP at Ascend Ventures. Wow. Emil Michael went on to Uber, right? Yeah. Big deal at Uber. Caitlin, head of people at Reddit, now partner at 776. So it's like there's something special about that group of people, something special about that time. And it was very, very conducive to everyone's growth.
Yeah, that's really cool. I remember actually when they announced you going to Nextdoor, because I had started on, I think in January, and I think you came in, I can't remember exactly what month, but I do remember like an email about you coming in.
Oh yeah. Was
that a lateral move like into management? Was it like the same kind of continuation of the stuff that you were doing at Klout?
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah. The title that you had.
That's interesting. Yeah. Especially now when I look back or when I even think about, terminology like lateral moves and stuff, it's hard to really picture your career in a line, I think, or for me to picture my career in a line at this point. But title wise, it was lateral. So actually it was before we actually had a very well-defined leveling and titling. But yeah, they're like, hey, you're a director. And so here's your director of engineering title here. It's like, great, let's do this.
Yeah.
I wasn't really fixated on the title necessarily. That was also before I had a kid. So I'm like also not fixated so much on the cash comp.
Yeah.
But the idea was so interesting.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, I had spent all these years working on social media, encouraging people to use social media to get online. And then by the end of it, end of Klout, I sort of had a realization that I feel like people need to get offline and need to know each other in person. So Nextdoor is very compelling to me in that regard. Like we were using the technology to sort of break down the negative effects of technology, which is cool. But yeah, like they're like, here, we need you. So I joined. I think I was probably around the 50th employee.
Yeah.
Maybe the 20th engineering hire. But to answer your question, I was a manager or director. No one to manage, no one to direct.
Yeah.
So guess what? You're writing code.
Yeah.
You're writing code. So day one, got my dev environment set up and started writing code. Over time, I built teams. So is it lateral? I don't know. Is it backwards? I don't know. It was the next chronological thing. And so certain things I had recognized, certain needs I could identify, and I had the skills to meet those. And so just did what I could. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Title means nothing because like two titles, the same thing. Your work could be, complete opposites of each other.
Yeah. It's so dependent on many things. It does mean something to some people, and I respect that. But the same title could be different things at different companies. And it's just one thing.
Yeah.
So Kevin, along those lines, did you always upkeep your kind of engineering skills even while growing into management at Klout? And is it kind of like riding a bike, or do you have to kind of do things to stay sharp?
Is it like riding a bike? I mean, like anything, you need reps, you need practice to stay sharp. And like the landscape changes, and it has been changing more quickly. Like think about what it was like for me to be writing ColdFusion in 2003, and then now, right? You have Cursor, you have these AI assist tools and frameworks and stuff like that. I think building software on a high level, like being able to think in terms of software, think modularly, right? Have platform thinking, systems thinking, that is abstract, and that's aside from any specific implementation. But yeah, you need to keep up. You need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
You're going to get left behind. It's like people ask me, what's the best piece of advice, life advice you ever received? And one of my very good friends who was the head of kind of sort of platform engineering at Klout, he's my good friend now. His name is Felipe, and he's the one who gave me the best advice. He just said, don't get soft.
Yeah.
That's period. That is the best advice I've ever received, right? So don't get soft. You have to, and whatever that means to you, whatever you need to do to make sure you don't get soft, that's on you. But you have to work.
And in terms of engineering, right? I mean, so does that mean that like if an engineer grows to a manager, does that naturally make them soft as an engineer?
No.
Or like how does one stay sharp as an engineer while growing into a manager?
That's a great question. Yeah, to answer the first part, yeah, does it make you automatically soft when you transition, right? Like, so, all right, if you think about the typical career trajectory, right? It's like you start off maybe an intern, then a junior engineer, software engineer, senior, then there you become a tech lead, right? Maybe your scope increases to include like projects and stuff like that. Typically that person I found sort of hits a crossroads where like, do I want to be a manager or not? Do I want to split or not? Right. And yeah, like there's only so much time in a day, right? I think in the beginning, well, being a manager is a different job. It's a different skill set than being a very good engineer. So in the beginning, you sort of have an identity crisis, but then it's not really possible to be a great software engineer and automatically become a great manager. You need to put work there. And maybe that time that you spend in investing in this other track comes at the expense of becoming a better engineer. But like I said, you don't lose the skill immediately.
Right.
For me, everyone's going to have a style. My style is a coach player style. And so this means I am committed to being a good people manager, right? And all, a mentorship, leadership, all the things that go into that, all the soft skills required to do that. But I pride myself in being able to write code alongside you and able to review your code. And I also pride myself in building with you. So
that sounds like it's a big value component. So you're able to kind of stay sharp, right? Stay hard in both areas, right?
Yes.
In developing and leadership, probably like expand the scope of what you build and building alongside, those who you lead.
And I'll caveat that, right? It's easy for me to say, right? Because like I mentioned to you, in both these companies, you start off at a very early stage and you're writing code.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then the organization is growing. And by the time your organization gets to like a size where you're managing 8 people, you've been there.
Yeah.
So you know where stuff is.
Right.
And that was my deal at Nextdoor. By the end of it, I was running 3 teams, right? It was like a fairly large org.
Yeah.
But I still know where stuff is.
Right.
So it's not necessarily fair. I think when you enter at the top, right, and you don't have that context, it's hard to do what I just mentioned. So I think this applies only to early stage. I think if you were to take a job at Meta, for example, and you're a director or even a senior manager at Meta, I think that it's not the best use of your time to do PRs when you're entering that. But when you're early stage, you do what you need to do.
Yeah, I think that's really, I'm actually thinking about this because I feel like recruiting kind of follows similar parallels to software engineering.
Yeah.
And I've done the back and forth between like being IC and manager and now back to being an IC. But it's true. Like, I think the things that make you a great manager don't necessarily lend themselves to always to like what made you a really great IC. And so you have to figure out how to do both things and then also not forget the other stuff because you got to coach people. And yeah, it's
correct. Yeah, that's a good call out. I mean, it's a cycle. So you how can you be a good management, leadership are different things, but how can you be a good technical leader? How can you be there for your people if you cannot empathize with what their day-to-day is? So I think it's a prerequisite to be an engineer before you can manage engineers. There's that. But also, if you have those self-management skills, project management skills, communication skills, all these things that are prerequisites for being a good manager, this will make you a more effective engineer as well.
Yeah.
Like you're going to be able to take a general problem, break it down, be able to communicate about it to the right people in the right way.
Yeah.
So this thing it's a cycle. And this kind of goes back to my earlier comment where it's like, what is career progression? Is it a line? Is it being a manager better? Is it a step up necessarily from being an IC? Like, no, these are all related skills, related behaviors.
Yeah.
And it's just all about being able to broaden your skill set, to broaden your ability to field bigger problems, different problems.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of how I see that now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, you moved up into a head of engineering role, like right before everything shut down, with the pandemic. And then after that, you went to Zapier. That one was straight into a director role. Was that like,
that's correct.
Was that a tough transition without that context? Because I totally agree with you on that. Like it is hard to manage when you don't have that, like the context. Yeah.
Yes, it was challenging, right? Like by the time I had joined Zapier, it was already 800 or 900 employees. Wow. So a lot of systems were already in place.
Yeah.
The organization was big, 200 engineers at the time, right? So there are many things that demand your attention, right? That are not writing code, that are not reviewing code.
Yeah.
And so I immediately showed up. I had an organization of 40 people. So not possible for me to have the level of depth that I did at my previous companies, because I was there at the ground floor.
Yeah.
So yes, it was very challenging.
So I have a question, Kevin. So you came up in a couple different eras. When you first started, it was post.com. Then you saw the social media decade. And now
I've seen some stuff, Boris.
I don't want to say what era we're in right now, but how would you compare and contrast the three eras? So when you first started out, the .com era, and then now, how would you compare the three? And then what era do you think we're in right now? And what do you think's next?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, naturally, right? As you all understand, like the job market has changed. Right. I think that the zero interest rate policy that fueled like all of the growth startups, right, that we're all familiar with, that I worked at in the previous decade, that's changed, right? That's changed. So naturally that in my mind draws a parallel to the first .com bubble pop. I mean, it's not necessarily as extreme as that. I think we know what we're doing in this industry more now, like where there is emphasis on revenue, things like that, things that were not emphasized during the first .com. But yeah, like the landscape has shifted, the job market's a little softer in tech, and that reminds me of that. But I would say that if you kind of imagine kind of the peaks and the valleys, I think the valley that we settle in here, it's much higher than even the peak from 2003. Yeah, like the world is accustomed to technology now. There's always a place for technology. There's always going to be companies that serve like those needs, and they're always going to be hiring. So the valleys are not as deep. So there's that. There's still funding. It's just flowing to different types of companies. And I think that kind of reflects in the types of companies that young people are starting. Like Boris, like we were talking about earlier, kind of 10 years ago, everyone had an app idea, sharing pictures, checking in, like it's going to be social geolocation. Let's get users, let's make money later sort of deal, because that's what the system rewarded you for. I think now it's harder to get funding or hit the metrics to get funding, to get follow-on financing. And so you'll find that folks are building SaaS companies or going deeper in the stack and just thinking about monetization, thinking about their business first as they build those companies. So I do think the way that people are recovering from whatever's going on now is more pragmatic and more constructive than the first .com bubble pop. But like the past decade, I don't know if that's ever gonna happen again. That was like, again, lightning in a bottle. I just don't know exactly what happened there, but I'm grateful to have been a part of it, being in the Bay Area and being in these small companies at early stages at the time that I was. Yeah,
that's, so this is kind of semi-related to this topic, but Boris and I are also talking about how it used to be that there were always mobile roles open everywhere. Like that was the thing. And I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like that's changed much. Like, it doesn't seem like there aren't any less mobile applications, but I don't see the roles as much. And I'm like, what's going on? Why is that a thing?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. My thoughts were just like what I had mentioned, right? Yeah. If folks are starting SaaS companies, like that mobile surface is less of a priority, right? But everyone sees mobile as like their computing interface. So that's not going away. They're being hired. There's always a need for that. I think the attention is elsewhere now. Attention is obviously on AI. Now, whatever that means to you.
Very open-ended question.
I'm optimistic. Of course, I've always been involved in startups, like in some way, and now I'm an AngelList, right? Which exists to power like the startup economy. Because AngelList believes, I also believe that startups are where innovation comes. Right. And so there's, when you have visibility into the types of companies that folks are starting, it's like, it's inspiring. Right. And you can kind of see what the next era will contain, and it makes me optimistic. Right.
Interesting. You bring up AI, Kevin. So AI is innovating in so many different areas. One of the areas that AI is innovating in is in software engineering itself, right? There's a lot of kind of, it seems like efficiency and advances that an engineer themselves can have using AI. What's it like being an engineer with AI? What's it like being an engineer, compared to without AI? Like, how's it building product right now with AI?
Oh, yeah. And just for context for everybody here, right? Like, although I've been managing people or have been managing people for a long time, I joined AngelList as an IC, senior software engineer.
Yeah.
So I showed up, we're writing code. And so, yes, I have got to experience firsthand, like what it's like to be an engineer in this era. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It is awesome. Do you know what I'm saying? So the IDE I use is Cursor, right? Cursor is a fork of VS Code that has native AI hooks into it. So you can do things like highlight a piece of code, ask questions. You can have it also construct boilerplate code for you. And it is a productivity booster, major for me. I would guess makes me, 50% more efficient, right?
Wow.
In the specific example would be, I think every engineer can empathize with sometimes you might know what you want to do, but it might be tedious to actually go through and do it. If you let that tedium slow you down, it could just take your momentum away, right? So I find that for me, using AI Copilot, so Cursor helps me maintain my momentum, because when I hit a tedious spot, I just ask it to help me out and it goes for it, right? So that's one. Two, of course, I've only been an AngelList for a short time. And so AI has, in my IDE has been a great help for me in onboarding. Like, I can ask questions that can be answered in an insular way that don't require sort of institutional knowledge. I can just ask quickly and get that feedback immediately. So it's been a great boon for my productivity, certainly.
I mean, having said that, if you're an engineer today, do you pretty much have to use AI? Just like, is the bar now at 50% more productivity for every engineer on the team?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you have to use AI? I mean, that assumes that everybody experiences the same level of productivity improvement from it, but I don't think everybody does. Like, you can imagine if somebody is maybe not as sharp of an engineer and they're leaning on AI to do everything, that could actually slow you down, because it's easy to end up down a wrong path. Imagine you don't have a starting point. You ask the LLM to do something for you. It gives you like a slightly wrong initial implementation, and you keep trying to hammer it in the right direction, and you're going to be wasting time. I've actually witnessed this in a live coding interview, by the way. But that's a different story, maybe for a different episode. But yeah, like, it's a power tool.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't know where you want to place that tool, it's not going to help you. It could even slow you down. That said, I don't think it pays to be sort of bearish on AI as a productivity tool, right? Out of some misguided principle, right? Just by saying it's blanket bad. It's not bad. I think you'd be remiss to not understand its abilities and how it can help you, right? But it's up to you to choose to use it or not. Folks that are fast at certain things will be fast with or without AI. If it makes you a little bit faster, you got to check it out.
That's a really interesting analogy. So it's not like it gives you more brain. It more kind of gives you like an extra pair of hands or two.
Exactly. That's the analogy I've been trying to explain. Well, at the moment, it feels like you have an assistant or a paralegal or an intern that requires you to instruct it.
Yeah.
You're not going to open your computer in the morning and then this thing is just going to get to work. You have to ask it to do things for you.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what to ask, nothing's going to happen. Over time, right, I think as technology advances and as more people, more startups invest in the space, I think it will be promoted from an intern to, team member. And then one day I'm working for the robots, right? Who knows? So... But yes, you do have to manage the AI employee at the moment.
Maybe that'll be the next era.
Maybe that'll be the next era. Yeah. I mean, that being said, I think there's sort of gloom and doom, like fear mongering about how AI is going to take our jobs. By that, I mean engineering jobs. Yeah. There's always going to be a place for engineers. I think that particular narrative is overhyped.
Yeah.
Just for the reasons I mentioned.
Yeah.
It's not going to be creative. It's not going to be able to create novel approaches.
Yeah.
Right. Just by definition.
Yeah.
They're pre-trained, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid for our jobs or anything. Yeah. I mean, you can even go back to earlier in my career, right? I started working in this industry before cloud, right? So if you wanted to launch a website, even web application, a service, where are you going to host this thing? You need to find a data center. You need to drive out there. You need to spend tens of thousands of dollars on machines, rack these things, network these things. And that's the barrier to entry. It would be equivalent for me to say, hey, in 2015, I was against cloud because I think it's more hardcore to rack my own servers. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, you have to evaluate these tools and evaluate the technologies fairly,
yeah,
you're allowed to have your feelings about it. But after that, like, look at it, please. So
that's so funny. I'm curious. So you started kind of mentioning this a little bit about some of the, now you've moved on. You're at AngelList. I'd love to hear a little bit more. Like, what are you working on over at AngelList? What are you doing for them?
Yeah. So I'm currently the engineering lead for the investor management team.
Oh.
Yeah. And so what we do is we build products to help venture capital firms raise funds, onboard LPs, investors, and keep them informed. So what this is there's 3 products. There's a data room product. So this is a landing page essentially that allows GPs to solicit for funds, right, that they're raising for. Then we have another product called Transact, which is a configurable closing flow. So this is, hey, I'm an LP. I want to invest in your fund. The GP needs to know you're a real person, that you're not laundering money, et cetera. That's what Transact is. And then finally, we have a product called Portal, which is the LP portal. So it's where you can exchange documents between the GP and the LP, right? This could be quarterly updates. This could be the LP submitting documents. So that's what I'm working on now. But before this, I was working on the portfolio management team. So we were working on an AI-powered portfolio tracker. Right? It just allowed you to forward email messages that pertain to any portfolio company that you might have as a GP. You would forward this to an inbox that we provide for you, and we would parse the email, structure it, visualize them for you, and just help you track the state of your portfolio. So a lot of cool stuff here to support the startup ecosystem, right? I've worked in early stage startups for a lot of my career. So it's just cool to go, I guess, up the food chain a little bit just to see what's happening here. Yeah. Right. And where does that money come from? Yeah. And how does it come to be? Yeah.
That's cool.
I love that. Yeah, you kind of found your way throughout a pretty broad section of the ecosystem, right? From the startup themselves, different types of startups, worked in venture for a little bit. Now you're getting work for the kind of, the behind the scenes of the venture industry. It's going to be pretty cool.
And AngelList itself is a startup. Yes, we're serving the startup ecosystem, but we have customers, right? And we build software, right? And so, we're 30 engineers. It's like, I'm back again. I'm working at a small company again. AngelList has been around for 14 years or so, but very much behaves like an early stage startup, right? We do a lot with few people, and it's exciting. And this is just, what can I say, right? Yeah. I'm a startup person.
I love that. You kind of lit up in a different way when you said that, Kevin. There's something about a startup, right, that just does that to you, right?
Yes, there is. And I feel grateful to have had the perspective, right? I've joined many early stage startups. So Klout joined at 12, it got to 100, and then it was acquired by Lithium Technologies. Then at Nextdoor, right, I was 20th engineering hire, 50th employee. We went all the way. Yeah. I was there for 9 years, right? Yeah. Right. You saw it. Yeah. So we went all the way. We got to 800 employees, went public, got to go to New York, ring the bell, all that stuff. So I can see that. I can see the range there. And I think that gives me the ability to really know myself and understand in what environment do I thrive. I just like the small team thing.
Yeah.
Love it. So, we at First had recruit for early engineering teams. We work with founders, right? We build early teams. We talk to a lot of people that are at the, later stage companies that are thinking about joining something early stage or considering it. Some are like excited about it. Some are like tentative about it. Yeah. What advice do you have for, an engineer thinking about joining early stage, or maybe for someone who's already moved into leadership, but who wants to go, work in early stage? What advice do you have for that person?
Yeah, I'm incredibly biased, right? Because I just told you I'm a startup person. But I think if those are two questions, like for an early career person, I think my advice to that person is you have a lot of time. It might feel like, say, your first job out of college, this is like a terminal decision, right? I think that I understand and respect that, especially if the job market is hard. There might be a scarcity mindset where you're like, maybe I just join a mega corp and rake it and it's stable and all this stuff, right? I do respect that. But I think if you are fresh out of school, there is a lot of life left, and you get a lot of turns in your career, right? So your job, I think, is to make the most out of those. And what I mean by that is to expand your optionality, expand your future opportunities. And I think that's the priority when you're early career. For that, I don't think there's a better place to do that than joining a startup. Yeah. Like I just mentioned to you, I joined Klout very early, right place, right time. It grew and I grew. Yeah. If it's growing, you're growing. That's it. That's what I would optimize for, because you will learn many skills. You will become a better engineer, but you might find yourself in a position like I was, where you are going to have to commit to managing people and decide if you want to become better at that, right? You will learn about business, because there's 10 of you, 5 of you in a room. You're going to learn a lot. And this is going to open a lot of doors for you because it's going to make you a more well-rounded contributor, right? Your shape is going to be different. So this is the place to do it. Again, no shade on if you choose to join a very large corporation. This is a trade-off. Not one is better than the other, I think. You might make more cash comp. You might get RSUs instead of options or whatever. But you have to think about, does this open doors for you later? And that's up to you to decide what kind of door you want to open. For me, I want to be able to work as many places as possible. And the more I can do on my own, the more skills that I accrue that are broader than just engineering, the better. So there's that. For the later career person like me, right, who chooses to join a small company, I think I alluded to this, right? My first advice was the advice I gave me when I chose to take the IC job here. What advice would you give, right? If someone said, hey, I really like this company, I really like this job, this idea, it's really fun to write code, but the title is not there for me. You'd say it doesn't matter. You need to get over it, right? So I had to talk myself through that for sure. And then what that allows you to do is it allows you to look at the job and realize, does this work give you energy? Does this make you a happier person? Does this make you a more interesting person? Forget about the other stuff. Obviously, you need to make some amount of money to live your life the way you want to live it. Of course, compensation comes in many forms. But don't be too preoccupied with what other people think. If you're later in your career, should know what you like doing, where you thrive, what you're good at, what people reward you for. And your job is to maximize the congruence between how you spend your days and what the company is willing to ask of you. So there's that. But again, your career is not a line. As long as you are growing, I think you're good. You don't need to always be walking up.
1000%. I agree with all that.
Kevin, where could people reach you? What would you like the listener here to do if they, hear this? Are you hiring?
I am hiring. AngelList is hiring. I'm also, I just love helping people. That's why I advise for startups. Just love having conversations. So, regardless of whether you want to work at AngelList, you can reach me on LinkedIn. Just search for Kevin Liu, AngelList. There's a lot of Kevin Lius in the world. There's only one Kevin Liu at AngelList. There's 4 Kevins at AngelList. Just make sure you put the last name in and you're good. But happy to have any conversations, general networking, but also we have many open roles that we're hiring for here at AngelList. So if you're interested in breaking into venture, interested in working at a fun early stage startup that's in a good financial position, that's in a cool part of town, hit me up. Would love to connect you.
Awesome.
Love that.
Is there a question that we missed today that you were hoping we'd ask and didn't?
No, I think you covered everything.
Yeah, good.
I think we covered everything. It's been fun for sure.
Awesome. Great.
Nice job, Alexis. You killed it.
Yeah. Thank you, Alexis.
You bet.
Cool. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. It was really fun kind of going through all your experience and the kind of view of the world from all that. Thank you again. Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Boris. Thanks, Alexis.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let us know what you thought of our episode on our Twitter or LinkedIn. Look for the links in the show notes. Both Alexis and I are not professional podcasters, as I'm sure you could tell. We just love talking about early stage startups.
And if there's a recruiting related question you'd like answered, or you could use help with anything hiring related, jump on our website. It's www.first10.com. That's 1st10.com. And we'll do our best to get that answered for you.
Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. My name is Boris, and with me is
Alexis Munger.
And we'll see you next time on the First 10 Podcast.
Bye.